Hi everyone and welcome along. Today we're going to do an Easter Bunny meadow pattern. So grab your paints and let's get started. It's been so lovely seeing how many of you have been enjoying my Easter content so far, because we've obviously got lots of tutorials from last year, so do go and check all those out in my various playlists. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little pattern just using the Easter bunnies and some like seasonal flowers. So I'm just going to put a little curve in for a sort of a base of a bunny, and then I'm going to pop in some flowers and an egg here or there. And I'm just going to fill up this page. Have another bunny there. I'll have a few eggs. And this can make a really nice card, or maybe, I don't know, if you're interested in maybe learning about sort of pattern making, pattern painting, then this is a fun little extra sort of exercise. I'll have another bunny there, and that's nice. So these little lines are just flowering stems that are going to be sort of built upon, and we'll just do some nice seasonal little bits like that. So colours wise, we're going to use a nice colour palette of oranges and tan colours. So I've got yellow ochre here, which I'm just going to mix up and wake up. And then I've got some cadmium orange. I've got burnt sienna up here. And then I've got a few other nice sort of warm brown colours lurking about in my palette that don't get much of a look in. But I think this is the time to start waking them up. So I always list the colours that I'm using in my episode notes, so if you ever miss anything, just head to the episode notes, and I'll also list the numbers of the brushes that I'm using as well. So I'm going to begin by painting some rabbits, bunny rabbits for you, and I'm also going to get some Payne's grey mixed up there just to create a bit of a shadowy colour as well. So that's the Payne's grey and burnt sienna, making a nice cool brown, and then we've got some warmer colours. So I like to try and paint my rabbits as quite loosely as possible. So we'll start off with one just here. So I'm going to begin with my size 2 brush, and I've got a nice bit of yellow ochre, and I'm just sort of creating a body. And then I'm going to create a little leg there, coming up, and then one little leg there, one there. Continue on. These are, I should say, these are sort of cute little, slightly sort of, you know, simplified cartoonish bunnies. And then for the face, so we're creating this kind of oval shape that I'm then going to create a sort of higher oval off the top. And that is a really nice sort of basic little shape for our bunny, and I'm going to give our rabbit a bit of a brown colour, and just a little bit on the ears and on the head there, and we're just going to let that dry, and then we can try a different one. So I'm going to take some of my burnt sienna here, and I'm going to do facing the other direction. So we'll do the back. So you create this sort of body shape and then start sort of coming downwards, and a little foot, a little back foot, and then this one come from the side. We'll have a little front leg there, and the face, and then we'll have some ears. And from that I will make some much darker colour and pop a few patches on our bunny. So I like to do these nice little loose watercolour bunnies because they just look really cute. And don't forget, we've got to put a little fluffy tail on the back, but we will do that. So I'm just going to fill in a third bunny, and then we will move on to the next thing. The next thing I'm doing is just colouring in the eggs with a wash of cobalt turquoise. I've got my size 2 brush again, and what I want to do is fill them in nice and dilute, so I'm using water rather than going back and picking up much more colour. And once I've coloured them in, I coloured those ones in a bit earlier because I want them to be damp, so I can add a few speckles in. Okay, so I've got a smaller brush, and I'm going to take a little bit of sort of slightly concentrated cobalt turquoise and just painting it in on some slightly damp. That one's sort of dried, so you can see the difference. Actually, this is quite a useful little exercise in seeing what happens when you put colour onto a wet surface as opposed to onto a dry surface. But I don't really mind that these ones have already dried a little bit, but just adding a few little speckles make them look like lovely little bird's eggs. And I like having a mixture of concentrated speckles and slightly more dilute ones. Next we're going to paint in some flowers, and I think what would be nice is some daisies, and maybe some forget-me-nots or buttercups, so like sort of spring meadow things. So what I'm doing is I'm just creating a really dilute colour. I had a bit of that turquoise in there. I'm going to take a bit of burnt sienna, a bit of Payne's grey, I put a bit of sap green in there. Now right now that looks like a really dark dingy colour, but if I add lots of water to it, it's going to lighten up and become a very useful colour that actually acts as a white colour. So I'm just getting that like that, and for our little daisies, if I do a little circle for each daisy I'm going to paint, and I might just add a few more in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this colour to paint in some very sort of quite sort of oversized and a little cartoonish petals. But what happens is these petals will dry and crisp up, and we'll have on our white page a lovely white petaled flower. It's quite clever. It looks all like dark and dingy when you first do it, but it really works. As I'm building the pattern, what's happening is I'm finding new gaps and looking to put new, like, little extra eggs or little flowers in. So now I've done the daisies and you can see they're really starting to crisp up. I'm now adding in forget-me-nots. So I'm using Cobalt Blue Deep. I'm drawing in little circles for each flower, and I'm using my size 0 brush to paint in really simple little circles of colour as petals. I'm doing 5 or 6, and they're all just a little bit sort of spaced out. It doesn't matter if they touch, but a little bit of a gap is better. When you're doing something repetitive for a pattern, you need to make sure that it's something you can paint over and over again and feel like you're going to be relatively consistent with it. So do think about that. That's why we simplify the design somewhat, to make sure we can paint it over and over again. I know you can use clever, like Procreate with the iPad Pro, or just clever things in Photoshop and things to repeat things over and over again, but sometimes it's just nice to do something hand painted, isn't it? So I can see that maybe another little stem of some sort there, but now I'm going to put in some buttercups. So I'm going to use the cadmium yellow there. And for a buttercup, it's not quite the same sort of style as a daisy or a forget-me-not, but I'm still going to draw in the circles, just so I've got it. I have one coming upside down there, right way up there. And I think that will probably be a daisy in the end, but we'll do our buttercups. So what I'm going to do is use my size 0 brush, and I am going to this time paint more sort of classics of petal shaped petals into the centre of that circle. So I'm going right in with more sort of triangular shaped petals. Having waited for everything to dry, I've now gone round and filled in the centres of the flowers with cadmium yellow in both the daisies, where I've really filled out the circle and sort of created a rather bulbous top at times, and then for the forget-me-nots, just a little dot, because there is a little dot of yellow, but it's a much more subtle thing. And this just shows how the yellow is really starting to fill out and become present in the colour palette. And what I'm going to do is, for the other eggs that I've drawn in, I'm going to do the technique I did with the first eggs, but I'm going to do it with Cobalt Blue Deep. So we're building a pattern the whole time, because you want to be thinking about having a colour palette that's limited to just a few colours that work well together. And in starting with the sort of tan colours on the bunnies, I have gone for a sort of palette of complementary colours. So on one side you've got the sort of orangey browns, and on the other you've got bluey tones. I mean, technically, if we were going true complementary colours, I'd be doing purpley colours in here as well, but I quite like the spring palette we've got going here. Just don't want to get my hand in any wet paint. So just turning it around. It's sometimes fun to just fill a page like this with little illustrations and just sort of see what you come up with, because I keep thinking of new things as I keep going on, and I like that. That shows it's sort of a creative kind of pursuit. And so just adding a few speckles whilst it's wet, and then we can add more when it's dried. Now it's time to start putting the stems in, and I've started, as you can see, and I'm just using sap green, and I'm using my rigger brush because it's just fantastic for lovely long sort of smooth lines. It takes a little bit of getting used to if you've not used one before. But I think the big difference between this and a little detail brush is just that you can do those long lines and not sort of run out of hand. And that sounds like a strange thing to say, but sometimes you need to sort of keep shifting your position when you're using just a little detail brush, because the bristles are so much longer on a rigger brush. It just is brilliant for lots of long slender lines like these. So at the moment we're just doing the stems, and then once we've got all of those painted in, we can do some leaves. I'm using sap green again and my size 0 brush to place in the leaves. So for the forget-me-not, I'm doing like a range of sizes, some little ones, just little curls like that, and then a few larger ones. For the buttercups, now they don't tend to have very large leaves apart from a little leaf at the join there, but for the daisy I'm going to do like a wild daisy leaf, which is a sort of pronged thing like that. And you can just sort of keep an eye on the composition of the piece as a whole to see where these leaves are going to help with filling in the gaps and maybe covering over little joins that you want gone. So once that's dried, it's also the perfect time to rub out the pencil, and then you can see sort of what's still looking like. And I always find my eggs always need a little bit of a sort of evening up. So what I like to do is I like to get a bit of the colour that I did the wash in, just in a slightly more concentrated tone, and I just sort of place it in almost like a bit of a shadow if it's needed. I don't think it's needed on all of them, but then it's just quite fun to just add a little bit of extra on them. I think it's coming together really nicely, this little piece. Of course, we haven't forgotten our bunnies need bringing to life with a fluffy tail and some eyes and whiskers and things, and eyes and nose. But yeah, so just sort of spend a moment making sure you're happy with your eggs. And then you just clean off the brush and smooth it in, just like that. Now for our bunny rabbits, we can use this sort of petal colour. If we want for a fluffy tail, I might just add a little bit more Payne's grey to it, just get it a little bit more like that. And I'm sort of creating a tail that sort of has a bit of unpainted space in it, so it looks like it sort of caught the light. And then I think for the details I'm just going to use Mars Black. Then I'll get my slightly smaller brush, I'll get my 4/10. And I think it's sort of fun to maybe have a few little paws like that. And then so for our bunny that's sort of facing us, we're going to do a little eye and a little eye like that, a cute little eye, and then just that's all we really need. So we'll do an eye, and then so we don't see it all, but I think that's rather cute. And then if you want to add a little bit of extra detail on, maybe an extra little sort of sweep on the ears, that looks rather nice. And then I just like to do extra little things to the flowers. I might get a bit of orange and just add a few dots to the center of the buttercups. And then just a little sweep of colour to the daisy centres as well with that orange, I think is rather nice. Fun. And yeah, and I think what's rather nice about this is you could sort of keep going on if you wanted to add maybe a little sort of almost like dots of pollen around, just in colours that you sort of included in your colour palette. So I'm just using my size 0 brush. I quite like the idea of pollen flying around. I know that ant dreads that time of year when hay fever comes a-calling, but if we can at least make it look pretty, then maybe he won't be so upset by it. And so this will make a fun little Easter project, maybe a really good page for your journal, or some kind of inspiration for a pattern design, or simply a nice excuse to get the paints out. I really hope that this inspires you to get creative this Easter, and if you don't celebrate Easter, then maybe just some springtime creativity. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget we have tons more Easter content on the playlist, so do have a look at that. I want to say a huge thank you to my patrons for their support, because that support enables us to keep creating videos like these that everyone can enjoy. And if you enjoyed it, then hit the like button and comment below to let me know how you got on with that one. And of course, if you never want to miss another video, then hit the subscribe button and the little notification bell, and we'll see you again next time. Bye!